You no doubt recall that little anecdote of Mola Nasruddin when he's asked by someone, Mola, why do you always answer a question with a question? And the Mola said, do I? So hearkening back to that question, why do we have to know who we are, and why do we have to know what we do? And perhaps realizing that the questions that have been asked are with the possibility of answering this question. There's a story about a tall, fair-skinned, red-haired infidel that happened to wander into the domain of the Queen of Sheba. But of course, being so totally unlike the Nubian statuesque people of that place, he was immediately incarcerated in a dungeon. But the Queen of Sheba was quite intrigued with him, and so she would often have him brought out into her presence so that she could discuss with him where he came from, what his faith was, and so forth. But all of the people who surrounded the Queen of Sheba were very concerned about this, because they were afraid that he was going to make inroads into the court, and so they were very adamant about reminding the Queen of Sheba that this was indeed an infidel. He could be a spy who wanted to take over her kingdom, and he should be forthwith beheaded or dealt with in the way that infidels usually were. So the Queen of Sheba, having to concede to the people of her court, decided that she would pose a question to this infidel, and if he was able to answer the question correctly, he could be returned to his home land unscathed. But if he couldn't answer that question, he would be dealt with in the way of all other infidels. So the question that the Queen of Sheba posed to the tall red-headed being was, where is the center of the universe? And so the infidel was sent back to his dungeon and told that the next morning he would have to answer this question. But when he went down to his dungeon, of course, his thought was that there was no way that he could answer this question. What would be the answer to the question, where is the center of the universe? So in great, great despair, he fell down on his knees. Now, as it so happened, as it is in a lot of these places, there was a central slab in that dungeon. And it so happened that when he fell on his knees, his head came down to rest on the very center of that slab. And as he was inwardly wailing and at a loss as to how he could answer this seemingly unanswerable question, a great booming voice arose from the depths of that slab and gave him the answer. The next day, when he was taken before the Queen of Sheba, and he gave the answer to her, he was released and escorted back to the borders where he could cross into his own territory. And then there's a second story. Second story is about a king who heard that there was an elixir of immortality, and this king longed to live forever. So he called his son to him, an only son, who had now arrived at adulthood. And he said to his son, "My son, since you have now arrived at maturity, I want you to go and on a quest for me to find the elixir of immortality." And so the son, discarding his royal robes and putting on the garments of an ordinary peasant being, and taking a flask in which he could place the precious water, he left his palace and began wandering the world in search of this elixir. He went far and wide, asking everywhere, but no one could answer the question, until at last he came upon an old hermit. And when he asked the hermit the question that he had asked so often, "Where can I find the well that contains the water of immortality?" the hermit said, "Why, it's only a few leagues from here." And taking his staff, he pointed in a certain direction. Now, after thanking the hermit profusely, the prince was about to set out when the hermit said, "Wait, wait. The well of the water of immortality is to be found in the cave that you will find. But heed what I say. Listen to the bird that lives within that cave." So, setting off, the prince indeed found the cave, and when he entered its dimness, and his eyes grew accustomed to the dark, he saw a light, and he followed that light until it led him to what was obviously a well. When he gazed into that well, it seemed to go right to the depths of the earth, infinite, so deep he could not see its depths. But he took his flask and he lowered it down into the well and drew up the water that it held. It was icy, cold, and clear. And the prince thought, "I will take this to my father, but I myself will drink of the well." But just as he was about to bring the flask to his lips, a bird spoke, squawking in a strident, weak voice. Strangely, that weakness and that strident sound went together somehow, and the bird said, "Wait, look at me. I have no feathers. My claws are worn down to the stub. No birds of the air will have anything to do with me. I have no companions, and I am doomed to remain this way for eternity, for I am immortal." And the prince said, "Is it then that this elixir brings immortality without regeneration?" And the bird said, "Yes, look at me and heed well." The prince immediately tipped the contents of the flask back into the well and made his way back to his kingdom to relate to his father, the king, what he had discovered, experienced, and learned. So the question that's posed after these two stories is, what was the answer that the infidel gave to the Queen of Sheba's question, where is the center of the universe?
Present.
And what is immortality for you now?
Present.
Center of the universe and immortality. After a self has been erased, so that we can no longer point to ourselves at our heart, believing that this is the center of our being. And immortality, where are there any boundaries? Where are there any limitations to this no center, this non-being? So where is the center of the universe for us now? What does immortality mean to us now?
But there isn't any boundaries, though, is there?
No.
So we have no boundaries. We don't go, oh, we can only do that. Or,
No. So where is infinity? Where is immortality? What?
No beginning and no end.
No beginning and no end.
You know your body's not immortal, the soul is. So you can't rely on the body to be immortal. And so therefore, the beings are himself.
Okay, but if we look at that boundlessness, that limitlessness, that no selfness, where can we find a soul?
It sits in the centre of the forehead as a point.
So is that a center for you?
I don't think we have a centre anymore, do we?
You do not. You cannot have a center of nothing.
That's right.
It's not possible. Thank you.